Congruent polygons. Congruent polygons have the exact same size and the exact same shape. Their corresponding sides and angles are the congruent parts between the two figures. Each pair of corresponding angles have the same measure, and each pair of corresponding side lengths are the same length. So if we take a look at these two triangles, I notice that they have 3 pairs of equal sides and 3 pairs of equal angles, which is what makes them congruent. So why don't we list out the angles that are equal? Well, every right angle measures 90 degrees, so right off the bat, I know angle A is going to be congruent to angle F. Angle B has 1 arc mark, so does angle G, so that means angle B is going to be congruent to angle G. And then last, the 2 arc marks are on angle C and on angle H. So those are the corresponding congruent angles. Now the congruent sides, the triangle on the left, I have side AC with 1 tick mark. Well, that's going to be congruent to side FH with 1 tick mark. 2 tick marks now, I have side AB is going to be the same length. It's congruent to GF. And last, the 3 tick marks, BC is going to be congruent to GH. So those are the pairs of corresponding congruent sides. Now let's talk about a congruent statement. I'm going to say triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. Now, there's a reason why I'm doing it in this order. So I said ABC, then I'm going to say F, G, H. Now you might think, oh, I just did it alphabetical, but not really. Because let's talk about this thing right here that's called a congruent statement. A congruent statement is critically important because it tells you, without even looking at a picture, what angles will be equal and what sides are equal. There's technically many different correct ways we could have written that congruent statement. Now, they are written in a specific order to identify those congruent corresponding parts. Single letters will tell you what angles are equal. Let's go back up here. What was the first letter here? A. What's the first letter here? F. Wasn't A congruent to F? Sure was. What's the second letter here? B. What's the second letter here? G. Wasn't B congruent to G? Yep. So remember, single letters tells you what angles are equal. If C is the third letter and H is the third letter, we know they're equal. Well, that's single letters. What about pairs of letters? What's the first 2 letters here? AB. What's the first 2 letters here? FG. Wasn't AB congruent to FG? Yep. Now, what about the second 2 letters? BC and GH. Wasn't BC congruent to GH? Yep. And then the outer pair, AC and FH. Wasn't AC congruent to FH? Yep. So single letters tells you what angles are equal, and pairs of letters will tell you what sides are congruent. So why don't we mark up these triangles based on the given congruent statement? They said triangle ABC is congruent to DEF. Well, what's the first letter here? A. What's the first letter here? D. Meaning I know angle A has to be congruent to angle D. I know that. Has to be true. B is next. That's the middle letter. What's the middle letter here? E. So that means angle B has to be equal to angle E, according to the statement. Then C is the third letter. F is the third letter. So angle C has to equal angle F. Now pairs. Pairs. The first 2 letters here, AB. That's going to equal the first 2 letters here, DE. So AB is going to be congruent to DE. And notice, let's say you didn't have that congruent statement. Look at this. This side is connecting the 1 arc and 2 arcs. 1 arc and 2 arcs. That's another way you can figure out what sides should be equal. All right, next pair, we've got BC. I'm going to use 2 for this one. BC is the second 2 letters. What's the second 2 letters here? EF. So BC is going to equal EF. And last, don't forget about the outer pair. AC and DF will be congruent. All of that from a congruent statement. Congruent statements are critically important. It's really important that you're able to look at them and be like, oh, Single letters, the order of them, tell me what angles are equal, and pairs of letters, the order of them, tell me what sides are equal. Example 1, in the diagram, QRST is congruent to WXYZ. Find the values of X and Y. All right, well, I notice right here I've got an X. I've got this 5X plus 5 degrees. Oh, that tells me it's an angle. That's very important. What angle is that a part of? Okay, that is a part of angle W. Now, here's the tricky part. You want to use the congruent statement. You don't want to look at the picture and say, oh, I should set the top right thing equal to the top right thing. Nope. The congruent statement tells you what you should set equal to what. The 5x plus 5 is part of angle W, which is the first letter here. What's the first letter in the other part of the statement? Q. So I know, according to this congruent statement up here, I know that the measure of angle W has to equal the measure of angle Q, according to that statement. What is the measure of angle W? 5x plus 5. What's the measure of angle Q? 65. So there we go. That's how I set up my equation to solve for x. Subtract 5 from both sides. You get 5x equals 60. Divide by 5, and you get x equals 12. All right. Now we need to figure out y. Here's y. Y minus x inches. Uh-oh, no degrees. That is a side. So let me erase this so we can see this a little bit clearer. What side is that attached to? WX. If we look at the congruent statement, that's the first two letters, pairs of letters for a side. The first two letters here is QR. So according to the congruent statement, I know that WX has to equal QR because they're both the first two letters. So I know the Y minus X has to equal QR is 6. Now, thankfully, we just figured out how much X is. So we can plug that in. X was 12. Oop, sorry, that should be 6. And all I need to do now is add 12 to both sides, and I get that Y. Oop, not working. There we go. Y equals 18. In the diagram below, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Find all the missing sides and angles. Your answers should be numbers. Okay. So, let's take a look here. First things first, why don't we go with AC? That's listed first. AC is the outer two letters here. What are the outer two letters here? DF. So AC has to equal DF, which is 3.5. What about DE? DE is the first two letters here. What's the first two letters here? AB. So I know DE has to be congruent to AB, which will be 2.6. Last, we need to figure out how long FE is. Well, FE is the second two letters. The second two letters here is BC. So that means FE has to be congruent to BC, which is 3.7 centimeters. All right, what's the measure of angle A? Well, let's take a look at the statement. A is the first letter, D is the first letter, so I know that angle A has to be congruent to angle D, which is 73 degrees. Next, I have B, that's the middle letter, and E is the middle letter. So since they're both the middle letter, that tells me angle B has to be congruent to angle E, which means angle B will be 65 degrees. And last, we've got C and F being the third, so that means C has to be congruent to F, which is 42 degrees. At this point, I'd like you to pause the video, and I'd like you to try out examples 3 and 4 on your own. When you're ready, unpause the video and check your answers. Okay, in the diagram below, we know ABGH is congruent to CDEF. Find the value of X. Okay, well, X is a part of right here, it's a part of angle H. How do I know it's an angle? Because it's got a degree symbol, it's tucked in the corner. H is the last letter here. What's the last letter here? F. So that means I know that the measure of angle H has to be equal to the measure of angle F according to that congruence statement. So that means that the 4x plus 5 has to equal 105. That's my setup. According to the statement, last letter equals last letter when it comes to angles, so set those equal. Subtract 5 from both sides, you get 4x equals 100. Divide by 4, get x equals 25. Next one, we're trying to find x and y. Well, first x that I notice is right here, the 2x minus 4. That's feet, that's not degrees. That means that is a line segment. That is line segment QR, which is the second two letters here. What's the second two letters here? FG. So according to the statement, I know QR has to equal FG. Well, that means the 2x minus 4 has to equal, FG is 12. So again, use the order of the letters in the statement to know what you should set equal to what. Remember, the pictures might be spun around. You don't always want to say, oh, let me set the top equal to top, bottom equal to bottom. Nope, that's not how it works. If they give you a congruent statement, that is critically important. So we can add 4 to both sides. And we get 2x equals 16. Divide by 2, we get x equals 8. Well, what about y? Y is right here. This is certainly an angle because it has a degree symbol that says 6y plus x degrees. It's tucked in the corner here. Let me clear this out for you. That is angle Q. Q is the third letter. What's the third letter here? F. So according to the congruence statement, I know that the measure of angle Q has to equal the measure of angle F because of how the order of the letters are. So that means Q is going to equal F. So the 6y plus x has to equal 68. Thankfully, in the last part of the problem, we figured out what x was. It was 8, so I can substitute that in. For x, I could subtract 8, and I get 6y equals 60. Divide, and you get y equals 10. Next problem says write 2 different congruent statements based on the diagram below. Okay, now if I'm writing a congruent statement, the one triangle is congruent to the other. It doesn't matter how you name the first one. I'm just going to go alphabetical and name the first one ABC. Now, it didn't matter how I named that one, but now the order matters because you want to look at the arc marks. How many arc marks did A have? It had 1. What has 1 over here? E. So E has to be in the same position as A because they are congruent. Next, I said the middle letter was B, which has 2 arc marks. What has 2 arc marks over here? D, meaning the middle letter here has to be D. And last, we said angle C, which had 3 arc marks. What has 3 arc marks here? F. So I have to list F last. So you got to be really careful and make sure the congruent parts line up in your statement. It did say to write 2 different statements, so we can literally write this in any other order now. Instead of ABC, I'll write CBA, which means what was equal to C? F. So F has to be first. B was equal to D. And then what was equal to A? E. So there you go. There's an example of 2 different congruent statements based on the diagram. In the diagram below, we know triangle XYZ is congruent to triangle RST. Find the values of X and Y. Your answers should be numbers. Okay. Well, I've got an X right here. Oh, degrees, that means it's an angle. What angle is that a part of? It's a part of angle Y. If I look at the statement, Y is the middle letter. What's the middle letter here? S, which is how much? 30. So according to the statement, I know that the measure of angle Y has to equal the measure of angle S based on the order of the letters. So that means the 2x minus 20 has to equal 30. We can add 30 to both sides. We'll get 2x. I'm sorry, add 20 to both sides. Add the 20 to the 30 to get 50. Divide by 2, and you get x equals 25. What about y? Well, y is right here. 3y plus 9 centimeters. Well, what is that a part of? ST, which is the second two letters here. Well, ST, according to the statement, has to be equal to YZ. Uh-oh, we don't know how much YZ is. But if we look at the diagram in the triangle on the left, I'm going to circle blue. What do you notice about side YZ and side XZ? They both have a tick mark, which means we know that XZ, I'm going to write this over here just so you can follow along. According to those tick marks in the picture, I know that XZ is equal to YZ. And they told me XZ was 15, which means YZ also has to be 15. So I can plug that in for YZ. And how much was ST? 3y plus 9. So there we go. I'm on my way to finishing the problem to figure out how much y is. So now all I need to do is take that equation. I'm going to start off by subtracting 9 from both sides, and you'll get 3y equals 6. Divide by 3, you get y equals 2. I'd like you to pause the video and try example 7 on your own. When you're ready, unpause the video and check your answer. Keep in mind, there are a lot of correct answers here, so your answer might be different than mine. Okay, we need to write two different congruent statements. So I need to say some triangle is congruent to some triangle in two different ways. Let's start off with the triangle on the left. We can name it any way we want. You could name it ABC. You don't have to. How you name the first one doesn't matter. Naming the second one, the order now matters. Because I started off with A, which has a 60-degree measure. What has 60 degrees over here? R, which means R has to be first. Then we said B. What was the measure of B? Well, the measure of B was 90 degrees. It was a right angle. What was the right angle over here? P, which means P has to be next. And then last, angle C was 30, and so was angle Q. So there we go. And the easiest way to write it another way is just to write it backwards. CBA is congruent to QPR. Again, your answer might be different than mine, as long as the equal angles, the single letters, are matched up in the correct order.